Mike, welcome to our Coffee with an Elder chat. I'm so
Thank you.
excited to have you here and to get to know what we now call legacy elders in the Central European region throughout these chats. We are going to sit down here, all of our legacy elders, and ask them all the same questions. So I'm really excited to hear from you today as you share a little bit from your heart and heart you have for CE region and also the impact that you have on all of us. So Mike, as we start this chat, I would like to ask you if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and also a little bit about your family.
Okay. I grew up in Zimbabwe, which was then called Rhodesia a long, long time ago. And I have one wife and two children. And we've been married, we'll have been married 50 years come December. We have two kids. We have a daughter and son-in-law, and this is my better half, Roz.
I look 50 years worn, don't I?
You look wonderful.
You know, this is going all over Central Europe, right?
Oops.
Thanks for coming here.
It's been a good 50 years.
Congratulations. It's a great number. It's a great number.
So before I was interrupted,
sorry.
We have two kids. Our daughter and son-in-law are in YWAM. Our son, Alec, is the Dean of the College of Communications, U of N. And our daughter is Academic Registrar for the U of N. Then we have a son who's a pediatric consultant in A&E in Children's Hospital in Belfast. And his wife is an outstanding artist and very community-minded. We have 5 grandchildren, 4 teenagers and 1 wannabe teenager. And yeah, that's our family. We moved to Northern Ireland in 1991.
Wow.
So 30 years ago, on the word of the Lord. Wow. We've had an amazing life together. We're incredibly privileged to have the family that we have and for our kids to have married the people that they married. And we've just seen God's blessing on our family life every step of the way.
This is so wonderful what you shared. You guys are definitely a beautiful family, and congratulations on your 50th anniversary.
Not there yet, December.
Well, in December, yes. But we are so glad to have you as an elders in our region. Really, we are blessed by you. I would also like to go to a next question and ask you, how did you get into YWAM? Where did you do your DTS? Tell us some stories.
Well, I was in business back in the 1970s and had great plans to become a really wealthy businessman. And in 1976, we were both filled with the Holy Spirit. And the Lord said, I've got a better plan. Rather than you making money, I'm going to get you to go live without any money. And for the next 3 years before I left my business, we pioneered a youth ministry, which was a discipling ministry. It was multicultural, which was very controversial during the Civil War in Rhodesia back then. But the Lord did some amazing things during that season. And in 1978, we were looking for some materials to use for one of our outreaches with our youth group. And 2 girls we knew had just been to YWAM in South Africa. And they said, why don't you go and see YWAM? And we knew nothing about YWAM. We thought they were one of those weird cults you should have nothing to do with, you know? So we went down to South Africa and we met YWAM, and we stepped onto the property, the one and only YWAM base in South Africa at that time. We stepped on the property and just knew this is what God wanted us to do. So we went back later in the year by invitation to a youth conference that was being run by YWAM. And the speakers were Don Stevens, Lynn Green, Joy Dawson and Lauren Cunningham were the 3 speakers. And it was an amazing time. We had amazing encounters with the Lord. And while we were there, the YWAM leaders suggested that we come back later in the year and do a DTS. And I shrugged it off. So, you know, I'm in business. I don't take 3 months out of my business to go and do some discipleship thing, you know.
Sure.
For 2 weeks before the school was due to start, I woke up one morning and I knew we were supposed to be there. So I said to Roz, I think we're supposed to be there. She said, so do I. I've been waiting for you to hear it from the Lord.
Wow.
She'd heard it weeks earlier. So we ended up doing that DTS at the end of 1979, left my business at the end of 79. In 1980, we started our first discipleship training school, but in our own youth ministry, not YWAM, but in relationship with YWAM. But during that year, we went to the YWAM staff conferences, and we had already felt YWAM was where God wanted us to be. But we met some amazing people during that time, Floyd being one of them, who had a huge impact on our appreciation for the values that God had invested in YWAM leadership. The interesting thing was that at the end of 1980, we went for a holiday in South Africa, and we were asking the Lord, what next? And I met with a church leader in South Africa who invited me to speak in his Bible school for a week. And he asked me what my vision was. So I told him it was about discipling and the nations and moving out of denominational structures. He said, well, the way I see it, you have two options. And one of the two options is to join YWAM. So I thought, well, that's interesting. We were heading home through another city in South Africa, stopped to see a pastor friend of ours, walked into his office, and the first thing he said was, Mike, God's told me you're joining YWAM.
Wow.
And we stopped at the YWAM base on the way home another day later and asked to speak to Ian Muir, who was the then South African leader, became regional leader and then part of Team 3 as time went on. But asked to speak to him and he wasn't there. So we spoke to Shastine, his wife, and told her why. And she said, I'll let Ian know. And about a week later, after we got home, I got a phone call from Ian saying on Christmas Eve, he'd been mowing a friend's lawn and the Lord spoke to him so clearly, Mike and Rosa, to join YWAM. He says, it was so clear, I nearly went right then and then to pick up the telephone and phone you. And the Lord said, wait, they'll come to you. And a couple of weeks later, we showed up at the base saying, God's told us to join YWAM. So in 1981, we officially became part of YWAM at the Europe, Middle East and Africa Staff Conference in Tortosa in Spain. So that's how we came into YWAM.
This is so wonderful. I'm really so inspired by what you share, and this amazing story, how God spoke to you and to other people. And I think now that
we've got no wiggle room, we can't get out, you know.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. But I want to say that now those were the easy questions, but now I would like to ask you a bit more tricky question. Like, could you share with us something most people in the area wouldn't know about you? What is something we don't know about you yet?
I'm persistent. Some people know this. I asked Roz to marry me 14 times before she said yes.
I think everybody knows that story.
Not everybody travel that much in Central Europe. Other things, lots of things. Mostly just practical little things. I love motorcycling. I spent 9 months in the Rhodesian Air Force doing national service, where I was a paramedic. I continued as a volunteer paramedic in the Air Force for a number of years after that. And then, as I said, in 1976, we were filled with the Holy Spirit. And so I transferred from the Air Force to the Army so that I could join the Corps of Chaplains. And I spent the last 2-3 years of the war visiting troops in the most dangerous areas of the country where the fighting was going on.
Wow. Wow.
And one kind of fun story from that was I was meeting with a battalion of men, well, meeting with the leaders of the battalion of men deep in the border area of our country where the fighting was really intense. We were sitting around the fire that night and I was just sharing God's faithfulness and some miracles we'd experienced. And they said, do you really believe all that stuff? I said, sure, I do. Anyway, the next day, we were to go through one of the most dangerous valleys in the area in a convoy. One that was heavily landmined and where ambushes were frequent. So I said to the convoy commander, where do you want me? He said, get on the convoy wherever you like. So I got on the front truck, which is the most dangerous one to be on. It's the one most likely to hit the landmine. And within minutes, every troop commander was on that truck with me. And I said, shouldn't you guys be with your troops in the other trucks? They said, no, no, if God's going to look after you, we want to be where it's safe. Wow. So they didn't believe in miracles, but they wanted to be with me because I believed in miracles.
Wow, that's definitely was blessing for them, definitely back then.
You know, but it's a bit of a fun story, but look back at it and realize that just sharing our lives impacts people around us.
Yeah.
You know, whether we appreciate it or not.
Yeah.
Our life, our relationship with God has impact on the world around us.
Yeah. This is really inspiring. I'm so glad that you shared this story. I believe it's going to be inspiring for many other people as well. Now, I would like to ask you, could you share about one mistake that you made in leadership and what lesson you learned from it?
Only one.
Sure.
And choose the most significant mistake.
I will choose the worst mistake.
Okay.
Yeah, I see. She wants to duck out now. She doesn't want to be embarrassed.
Bye.
It is a leadership thing, but it's not my YWAM leadership. It's more my general leadership. And it's the most embarrassing moment of my life. Okay? And then I'll share a YWAM one afterwards, if you're okay with that.
Sure. Yes. Okay.
We were 2 years into pioneering, and I got an invitation from a very exclusive private high school for boys. It was kind of like the Yale or Harvard of Zimbabwe, very exclusive. And I was invited to speak to the 18-year-old guys who would be leaving school at the end of the year, going to university. And the invitation was to briefly share the gospel and open the evening up to question and answers, which I really enjoyed doing. And the invitation was for 3 months' time. And I was sort of listening to the Lord on the phone, no cell phones back then, listening to the Lord on the phone. And I felt he said, do it. So I accepted the invitation. And as I put the phone down, he said, you need to spend time with me now. And I said, yeah, you're right. I said, I've got 2 letters to write and the rest of the day is yours. Well, to cut a long story short, every day for 3 months, I just had one more meeting, one more letter, one more person to see. There was always just one more thing that got in the way of me prioritizing time with the Lord, specifically about that invitation. And it came to the day to go, and I had spent no time with the Lord at all in preparation. And so I said to Roz, you drive. It's a 140-kilometer drive to the school. I said, you drive, I'll pray. Well, we took a good friend with us. So Roz drove, and I spent the whole journey talking to the friend in the car. We arrived at the school. We had a very nice meal in the senior teacher's private study. And at the end of the meal, it was 20 minutes before the meeting, I said, please, can I use your office to just get my thoughts together for this evening? And he said, sure. So I went into the office, got down on my knees, and I said, Lord, what do you want me to say tonight? And you could hear the silence. It was like my words hit the ceiling and just fell back down to the floor again. And I started to feel desperate and anxious. And I said, Lord, I need something to say tonight. I can't just go in empty. You know, if you don't go with me, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
But as that 20 minutes went on, my mind became more and more blank. And by the time the head teacher walked in and said, it's time to go, I didn't know who I was. I couldn't have told you my name. I couldn't have told you where I was or why I was there. And I looked at this guy and I thought, who are you? He says, come. So I followed him into this classroom. There's about maybe 30 plus 18-year-old guys sitting there, and Roz and our friend. And this guy is saying something to these boys about me. And I don't understand why, because I don't know why I'm there. My mind was totally gone. And he looks at me and says, it's over to you, and went to sit down. And I looked at these guys and I thought, what am I supposed to do? And I vaguely remember saying something about Daniel. And it's like the words trickled out of my mouth and went splat on the floor in front of me. And I said, has anybody got a question? And some guy in the front row asked me a question that Roz said was so simple, a 5-year-old in Sunday school could have answered it. He might have been speaking in tongues for all I knew. I didn't understand a word that he said. So I looked at him and said, can we come back to that? Has anybody else got a question? And these guys looked at each other, stood up as a group and walked out. It was all over in 4 minutes. And as they walked out, the Lord restored my mind. I have never been so humbled in my life as I was that day. Roz said to me, you think you were humbled? She said, I had to sit there and acknowledge that that idiot up front was my husband. But the Lord taught me, he said, when I tell you to spend time with me so I can prepare you for what's to come, you need to do it. Because this is not about what you can do. It's about what I can do. Don't ever think that you can do what I give you to do in your own strength, because you can't. That was the biggest mistake I ever made. I don't want to make it again, ever.
And it's definitely a good lesson for all of us to hear and get reminded and encouraged how important it is to spend time with God and be obedient.
Even with that, as leaders, we make mistakes. And I think possibly one of my greatest mistakes was releasing leaders too soon. I've always believed in people coming up behind me, taking responsibility, taking leadership. And that is aggravated, for want of a better word, by the fact that I'm a pioneer. I'm not a builder. So once something is pioneered and I've got people who look like they're doing good running it, I want to move on and pioneer something else. And I made that mistake with our first base we pioneered in 1980, 81. We had Roz and I were the only staff for the first year. We ran a DTS, an 8-month DTS, and we were everything. We were the teachers, we were the small group leaders, we were the kitchen workers, we were the counselors, we were everything for the first year with 11 students. And then 4 of those students joined staff, 2 of them joined me for the next DTS. And then the 3rd year came around, and one of those first guys now led the DTS 2 years on. And I stepped out of the DTS, by which time I now want to do something new because I'm a pioneer. And the Lord very clearly opened the way for us to start a new base in the capital city, 350 miles away. And the young guy who was leading the DTS was doing a brilliant job. He was really a great guy. We'd worked with him actually for 5 years, because he'd worked with us in our youth ministry for 3 years before he did a DTS and came into YWAM. And had great respect for this guy. And so I almost literally just said, we're moving. In 6 weeks' time, we're going to the capital to start a new base. I'm appointing you as the new base leader. That was it. That was my handover to just say, you're now the leader, bye-bye. And it's only God's grace that he survived.
Wow.
He went through a really, really hard time. And I regret that I put him through that hard time. I don't regret that I made him the leader, because he was a good one. But I could have done a much better job of preparing him and equipping him for that leadership. It's a lesson I learned when it came time to leave Zimbabwe, move to Northern Ireland. By that time, we had 5 bases, 2 in Zimbabwe, 1 Zambia, 1 Malawi, 1 Mozambique. And I was the area leader then, obviously not base leader, I was the area leader then. And we spent 2 years working with our leaders in each of those 5 locations, walking through what it meant for me to leave and someone else to take over. And we did a much better job that time around. And I think we did a much better job when we handed over leadership in Northern Ireland to Johnny Clark back in 2007 as well. So yeah, I think we need to recognize what our giftings are, and not just our strengths, but our weaknesses. And sometimes we need to pay more attention to our weaknesses so that other people don't get burnt in the process.
That is so true, and also so amazing to hear. I really appreciate you sharing these stories. Now, Mike, as we are coming closer to an end, I have this final question for you. And if someone was to ask you, what it means to you to be an elder in the area, what would you say?
The one word that would come out above all others is privilege.
Mm.
Our involvement in Central Europe has been sporadic because multiple circumstances have not enabled it to be more.
Mm-hmm.
Although my heart would have been to be much more, but it began with being involved with a brother and sister, teenagers who were pioneering a little YWAM team in a village outside of Timisoara back in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And we were involved with them, and we sent outreach teams to there and to Serbia and to Kosovo.
Mm-hmm.
And when I visited those three teams, I said, what's our priority for the next 5 years? And he said very clearly, Romania, of those three.
Mm-hmm.
So we stayed involved with that brother and sister. In fact, we are still in connection, in fellowship with them today, even though they're long out of YWAM, married, got their own families. We're still good friends.
Mm-hmm.
But that got us involved in Constantia and Mediash and a couple of other places in Romania.
Mm-hmm.
And I was invited to be part of a couple of other things that were being born, but actually never took off for lots of different reasons. I had some involvement with regional leadership in Central Europe with Carmelitas Day and then Johannan later,
Mm-hmm.
and got to meet a lot of key leaders around Central Europe, primarily Romania, simply because 80% of YWAM Central Europe is in Romania.
Mm-hmm.
And we got involved in Slovakia in family camps in more recent years.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love Central Europe. I love the people of Central Europe. To me, the believers in Central Europe are one of God's best kept secrets.
Mm.
They're warm, passionate, compassionate, loving, visionary, motivated people who the world needs to recognize their potential.
Mm.
And I love the food too. I love Central European food. That's all it. And but yeah, I mean, I've probably been involved in half a dozen countries in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still a whole lot that I haven't been to yet, but we have a real desire to visit and connect with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's just that I just love the people, and to have the privilege of coming alongside what God is doing in Central Europe is huge for me.
Wow, wonderful. As I'm listening to you, I get encouraged, and I think it's also a privilege on our side to have you with us as an elder. Thank you so much for sharing wisdom. I would like to thank you for being with us, for sharing your heart, your stories, for taking time and to be with us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure and my privilege.
Thank you.